This is Austria Wien.
Can I find the Emperor's Jubilee Church? They might tell you, well, no idea, but not in Vienna. Because we don't call it like this, it's a long name, so we all call it the Mexico Church. And that's because it's located at Mexico Square, and that's because Mexico was the only country in the world that would protest against the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria by Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in 1938. So the rest of the world didn't say anything, they were not against it, they were indifferent, they didn't care whatever, or they were afraid to protest. Just Mexico was brave enough to protest at the League of Nations, which is today the UN, you could say. So at least a little square is named after the country. Yeah, and you've seen the church, actually. You've seen the most beautiful part of that church. It's a rather modern church, and so inside it's not that exciting. If you want to have a look at a beautiful church, then I recommend you St. Stephen's Cathedral. We will end our walk there. That's a great church. Or nearby St. Peter's Church as an example for the Baroque architecture. So we got plenty of old churches here that are really worth a visit. So I talked about the underground, that I will point it out, the underground stations, and they're coming up now in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on the left now you have a glass pavilion. This is the underground station for your ship. The station's name is Vorgartenstraße. You see there is a white U and a blue cube, the sign for U-Bahn Underground, Vorgartenstraße, with the garden in it, so this is easy to remember. And this is just 4 stops from St. Stephen's Cathedral. It's on the red line, also known as the U1. And yeah, so reach this station in less than 10 minutes from the city center, and then you walk just about 10-15 minutes back to your ship at pier number 1. So that's pretty easy, pretty convenient, but please don't forget to buy a ticket if you want to use it. A ticket is $2.40, and if you're over 65 it's $1.20, and you need to validate the ticket before you enter the platform. There's blue boxes and you enter your ticket there, you insert your ticket, then it gets stamped and it's valid, and you keep it until you exit the underground station, until you get overground. Again, we don't have turnstiles here in Vienna, but there's stuff on the trains that will check the tickets, and sometimes they close the whole station and you cannot escape without showing your ticket, and the fine is 105 euros, so it's not really worth it to risk it. In general, our transport system here is very reliable. very efficient, and it's very affordable for us locals. We have a yearly pass for everyone who lives in Vienna, 365 euros. €1 per day is the yearly pass for all public transport here in Vienna. That's quite a nice thing. Yeah, if you get any more questions about public transport, then just talk to me in the free time, as we're about to start the free time. Now, on the left, there is coming up the second most famous landmark of Vienna already, and this is the giant Ferris wheel. Not that giant, actually, but it's the last one of its kind. That's what makes it so special. From the late 19th century, like the church, and back then, these Ferris wheels, now on the left, and then a bit we see it better, were very modern, very popular around the world. They built them in many cities. Vienna wanted to be part of the club, so they built a Ferris wheel. After some time, people lost interest. It was dismantled all over the world. Just in Vienna, there was no money to pay for the demolition, so it's still there, fortunately. And it's still going very slow, but it's moving. It takes about 20 minutes for a ride. Great view, and it's not that exciting. You have more exciting things behind the Ferris wheel, actually, because this is the entrance to the amusement park, the Prater. Very old, famous, traditional amusement park, the second oldest in the world, going back to the 18th century, actually. So also great beer gardens over there, and in general a very, very popular place for the locals to spend some time. It's free of charge to enter that amusement park. It's within walking distance from your ship, or one stop with the underground, so you can easily reach it if you feel like exploring that area. Next, we have a column on the left side. There's a man on top of the column. This is Admiral Wilhelm Tegethoff, actually. He's the most famous admiral of the Austro-Hungarian Navy, and yes, we had a navy in the 19th century, one of the largest in the world even. The empire was a big country back then, and there was access to the sea via the ports in Trieste, today Italy, or what is today Croatia, Pula, Dubrovnik, Rijeka, for example. So yeah, nowadays, of course, Austria is landlocked, a small country, much smaller than in the past. Nowadays, Austria just has 9 million people living. In the past, the empire counted more than 50 million people, actually. Second biggest country in Europe after Russia, and that all went down with the end of the First World War. Austria lost all its surrounding territories. It became a small republic, and we still have a big capital city. Vienna is currently 2 million people. We just passed the 2 million mark last year because of the many Ukrainian refugees that arrived. About 70,000 currently live in Vienna. And so this makes it the second largest German-speaking city after Berlin, and almost a quarter of the Austrian population is living in Vienna. Big city for a small country. For those of you from the US, just to give you an idea, the size of Austria is a bit more than the size of Maine, and a bit less than the size of Indiana, if that helps you to get an idea. Well, we arrived already at the Danube Canal. Now this is one more part of the Danube. Nowadays a side branch of the main river. And this was the main part, the main branch of the Danube in the Middle Ages. So there the ships would sail, and it still flows past the city center. And this will take us now all the way to the ring road. The traffic is quite okay so far, so we will reach the ring road pretty soon. And yeah, let's talk a bit about the ring road. This is one of our main attractions. It's a road that goes around the former city of Vienna, which is now the old town, the historic city center. And this ring road, they started it around 160 years ago to construct it. Until then, you have to imagine that Vienna was surrounded for hundreds of years by city walls, massive fortifications. They defended Vienna throughout the history. They were very helpful, especially in defending Vienna against the Ottomans, the Turkish, who laid siege to Vienna 2 times, almost invaded Vienna. By the 19th century, these walls were not in the best condition anymore. They were also not needed. It was a time of relative peace. There was no danger of an attack. Also, they had invented dynamite already, and the walls might not have survived attacks with dynamite. So the Emperor Francis Joseph, he wanted the walls to be taken down, and he had the idea of a big, magnificent boulevard, like something like the Champs-Élysées in Paris. That was what inspired him. So they took down the walls, which took many years actually. Some parts of the walls are still left here and there. You can see them in some places in the city center. And then they worked for decades actually to construct the ring road. It started in the second half of the 19th century and it lasted into the 20th century. There was one whole generation of Viennese that haven't seen the ring road finished, so this was a big construction project. The idea of the emperor was to have all the important buildings, representative buildings of the empire lined up there. Like the pearls on a necklace, you could say. We have the opera house, we have the parliament, city hall, the state museums, the university, the theater, and so on and so forth. They all are can be found on the ring road. They have been built there or relocated if the building already existed somewhere else. And in between these important buildings there were the land plots that were sold for horrendous prices to the richest of that time, or the ones that pretended to be rich. So if you wanted to be important, then you had to buy a land plot on the ring road and build your city residence there. Altogether, there were about 800 buildings around the ring road that they constructed in that time. This is also called the founders period, and it changed Vienna completely, because now the walls were gone, and until then Vienna was already very crowded inside. The living conditions were not the best. It was in parts still a medieval city actually, and so now the walls were gone, and then Vienna was growing and expanding, and outside Vienna there have been suburbs and villages and open fields, and that all became one big city. It all became one Vienna. By the early 20th century, Vienna counted 2.4 million people, more than today even. It was one of the largest cities in the world, actually. Yeah, and along the ring road, most buildings, they are still very well preserved, because they have been rebuilt if they had suffered from destruction during the Second World War. During the Second World War, about 30% of Vienna was destroyed, was bombed. Not everything was rebuilt, so occasionally you would find maybe a gap in between these historic buildings, but most buildings either survived the bombings or they have been rebuilt or repaired in the old style. So this is a very, very nice ride along the ring road. Yeah, then in a bit we will be there, and before that there is on the left side kind of a river that is now meeting the Danube Canal, and this river is called the Wien River. Do you know what Wien means? Have you heard Wien already? No, Wien, W-I-E-N, this is our name in German for Vienna, so this is how we call the city, and this city is named after that river, the Vienna River, the Wienfluss, Wien River, and it flows through the city from the west, and right there now on the left it meets the Danube Canal. And this river was also a rather dangerous river, flooded a lot, but they put it now in a kind of a basin, and it's not dangerous anymore. It's a rather small stream. It looks a bit bigger here as it meets the canal, but actually that's the water that flows upstream into the river from the canal. But a few meters upstream the river is rather narrow, so that gave the name to the city. Although you might think it's the city on the Danube, and that's what it's famous for, the Blue Danube Waltz, and you came here on the Danube, but it was named after that river. The name Wien goes back to the Celtic times. Actually the Celts were here first of all, before the Romans even, and they called the area here Vedunia, which means forest brook in that language. And over time, with the change of language, this in the Middle Ages they called this Veniam or Venier, and then at one point they called it Wien, Vienna. So that's the reason. Along the canal you see a lot of graffiti also, and this is legal here. This is a legal space. The city of Vienna is providing these surfaces to graffiti artists and to everyone who wants to be or thinks he is or she is a graffiti artist, so you can do whatever you want down there and you will not get sanctioned. And that's a nice thing, because down there it's very colorful, and that's very nice to have it down there where we have a lively area at night with bars and restaurants. And nowadays a lot of TV is shown. It's the European Soccer Championship, and people like to be there for the public viewing at the canal. And we have the hope and a gentleman's agreement, so to say, with these artists, that they will not move away from there and spray around the historic buildings like the cathedral or the palace. And it works quite well, more or less. I would say they respect that, and we don't have too much problems with graffiti in inappropriate places. Yeah, so we're about to cross over the bridge, which is meaning we will start the ring road in a bit. There is already one building on the left side, now behind the trees a bit, which is part of the ring road ensemble. This is the Urania, a former observatory. That's one of the last buildings. It looks pretty old, but it was only finished also in the early 20th century, 1910, former observatory, and nowadays it's just a cafe, restaurant and a movie theater. That's very common in Austria. If we don't know what to do with an old building which doesn't serve its purpose anymore, then we open a cafe or a restaurant in there. So you see the terrace there on the left, very nice to have breakfast or lunch in this former observatory building. And now we're crossing over, and there on the right side you see actually in the canal there is a kind of a ship, and on the ship there is a swimming pool. This is our swimming ship, and yeah, in the swimming pool this might be the only part of the Danube that is really blue. That's the blue Danube of Vienna. You might be disappointed after all of you know, I guess, the blue Danube vaults are our iconic vaults, but yeah, the Danube is not the blue, maybe only after a few glasses of wine that's bluer. But here in the ship you get a little bluish water. In the past they used to swim in ships on the Danube like that ship, but they didn't have a pool, they just had the ship like a frame, and they would swim in the Danube water. But there were plenty of these swimming ships docked here along the canal, and people would go on the ship and then they would be within this pool, so they could not be drifting downstream, so that would be safe, but the water was the same as the Danube water. That was quite common in the past, and that's a reference now that we have this modern ship here with the water in the pool. Yeah, and so we're about to start our drive on the ring road. There is the first building after the traffic light, a long building on the left. This is the former Ministry of War, and nowadays it's a multi-ministry building. On the ground floor there, above the windows, you have hats with hats and helmets. The different regiments of the Austro-Hungarian army are symbolized there, and in front of this former Ministry of War there is a man on a horse. This is Field Marshal Radetzky, and if you know a bit about classical music you might have heard about the Radetzky March. This is also a very famous composition by Johann Strauss Sr., the father of Johann Strauss Jr., the king of waltz, and he composed this Radetzky March to honor Field Marshal Radetzky, who is sitting there on his horse. Field Marshal Radetzky was a man of the army. He served 5 emperors because he served for a long time. He served for 72 years, and he retired when he was 90 only. Soon after his retirement he passed away, so not much time to enjoy the rest of his life. And when he was already in his 80s, he was sent to Italy to fight the rebellion there. He was sent there by the emperor, and he managed to fight the rebellion, and that was the reason why the Radetzky March was composed. So there we have him now on the horse. If you go to a concert in Vienna, the last piece is always the Radetzky March. That's where people clapping their hand to the rhythm of the march. The next building after the traffic light on the left, this is our Museum of Applied Arts. This is kind of an arts and crafts museum. There's a focus, for example, on design of furniture around 1900, when Vienna was a very creative and thriving place. That was also the time when The Jugendstil, the Art Nouveau style, was developed by Gustav Klimt, for example, the most famous Austrian painter. And part of that building on the left is also the Academy of Applied Arts, our art university. And Gustav Klimt, he went to that art school, and he was accepted at this university at the age of 14 already. So that means he must have been really talented, and he proved that later on. If you like Gustav Klimt, then your chance here in Vienna to see the largest collection of Klimt paintings in the world in the Belvedere Palace in the Austrian Gallery, a beautiful museum in a beautiful Baroque palace. And there, among others, there is of course the famous Kiss, maybe the most famous painting by Gustav Klimt. Now on the left there is the Stadtpark. The city park is the green lung of the city center, and this is a bit dedicated to musicians and composers. Several monuments are in there, and in there we find Vienna's most popular, most photographed monument. It's the King of Waltz, Johann Strauss Jr. He composed, among many others, the Blue Danube Waltz, which is almost our unofficial national anthem. We dance the waltz still at the weddings in the ball season, and Johann Strauss is responsible for making the waltz popular around the world. He went on tours from the United States to Russia, and in Vienna there were dozens of ballrooms. He was running several orchestras with the help of his brothers, and what helped him to be very successful, he was also a very handsome man. A bit of a womanizer actually. The women, they fainted when he went on stage apparently, some of them at least. And yeah, he was also engaged 13 times and he got married 3 times. Yeah, and he would always say that his first wife was the love of his life. She died after a few years. She was a bit older than him, and so he was so heartbroken and sad that he said, I will never marry again. Now that's it with the women. But then after 7 weeks he found himself in the church with a woman at his side in front of the altar, and yeah, he was married suddenly again. Yeah, you can decide for yourself if that would be the man for you, the handsome Johnny as we call him. Now have a look to the left into the park. That's the statue of Johann Strauss, the most famous, most photographed monument there, the gilded statue. Thank you, Isaac, for driving a bit slower.
I'm sure on the flyer.
Yeah, and he played, for example, in the venue on the left, the Cure Salon. This is a concert location from the 19th century until today. Every night you have classical music concerts in there. That was just one of the many, many ballrooms where the waltz was danced during that time. Yeah, and then, as I said, he got married a second time so suddenly after 7 weeks of being sad. He wanted to get a divorce soon after that because he wasn't happy with the second marriage, and that's not easy in a Catholic country like Austria. So he had a great idea. He became a citizen of Saxony, nowadays in Germany, and they are Protestants, so he became a Protestant. And then it was very easy to get a divorce, and he paved the way for the third marriage, actually. Very smart, very good idea. Now, yeah, left and right, many beautiful former city palaces of the rich families, and many of them have become 5-star hotels in the last 10-20 years. There's more than 12, I would say, nowadays along the ring road, very luxurious hotels in a historic building where the facade still looks like it used to look 120 years ago, or 140 years ago. And now you have all the amenities in there. The most famous of these the most exclusive of these 5-star hotels is, for example, the Hotel Imperial, which I will show you in a bit. This is also where state guests are accommodated many times, so it's paid with it's paid for with the taxpayers' money. And the president's suite in the Hotel Imperial, that could cost you a few thousand euros per night, actually. But yeah, you have a butler then, your personal butler, who is trying to fulfill all your wishes, or almost all your wishes. I think not everything would be possible. Let's say if it's a decent wish, he tries to fulfill it. Yeah, and the Hotel Imperial nowadays is owned by a businessman from the United Arab Emirates. He was a regular guest there, he stayed there many times, he loved it, and then at one point he might have thought, well, I can as well buy it as I spend time there, and so I have the money, and he bought it. And now he owns it and he stays there for free. history if it's in Vienna. It's the white building that is ahead of us still, and it will be on the right side. As we are about to leave now the ring road for a little detour, because there we got a very beautiful church I want to show you. Yeah, a few €1,000 for the president's suite there. Breakfast is not included, understandably, in that price, but just around the corner you will see in a bit that we have a McDonald's, and also in a beautiful historic building, and you can have breakfast, lunch and dinner there at the McDonald's. And then this is a bargain, I would say, to stay in the Hotel Imperial. Right, so we will leave the ring road. So most people here on the ring road that built the palaces, this was the richest families of the time. Entrepreneurs, industrial barons, as they were called. For example, who was very rich at the time? It was the people who owned a brick factory, because bricks were in high demand. Millions of bricks were needed for all these buildings who were built at the same time over some decades, and if you supplied the bricks, then you could make a fortune. There's just one exception. The building now on the left behind the tram, that belonged to a Habsburg. So the Habsburgs, they did not live along the ring road. Just one exception: the youngest brother, Francis Joseph the Emperor, he lived in that building on the left at the corner, and his name was Ludwig Victor, but they all called him Luzi Wutzi, and he was a bit of a special character. He was the black sheep of the family, you could say. He liked to dress in women's clothes, and he was also interested in his gender, actually, as the rumors were, and not only the rumors, so he behaved a bit like that, and that was a bit scandalous for Habsburg, for the brother of the emperor. And well, then there was one incident where he got kicked out of a kind of a sauna, and he found him, because he approached a man there, and the man didn't like that, and so they got in an argument. He was kicked out of the place. He found himself on the street of Vienna without any clothes. They kicked him out just like this, and yeah, after that he was banned from his brother. He had to leave Vienna. He was sent to a castle near Salzburg to be exiled there for the rest of his life. He couldn't get back to Vienna. Luzi Wutzi, yeah, that was his palace on the left side. And now ahead of us, there we have the Hotel Imperial that I mentioned, and next door the McDonald's that I mentioned. So two very important sites here in Vienna. By the way, that was the first McDonald's that opened in Austria here. And now we're leaving, and we are at Schwarzenberg Square, named after the man on the horse now. On the left, this is General Schwarzenberg. He was leading the Allied forces, the Prussians, the Soviets, the Russians, and Austria in the Battle of Nations against Napoleon in Leipzig. A very big battle, one of the largest battles in history. 600,000 soldiers were involved there, and that was where Napoleon was defeated. Ahead of us now we have the jet fountain to celebrate the quality of the Viennese water, which is excellent. We have great tap water here. It's a groundwater. Our tap water comes from the mountains, actually from the Alps. And yeah, we have drinking water fountains all over the city center. If you see one, you can refill your water bottle. If you brought one, you just take a sip. Actually, it's a much better water than the bottled water, and I recommend you really to try that, to refill your bottles. Yeah, don't need to get afraid. It's best quality, and it's clear, it's clean, and it's safe. And behind the jet fountain there is a soldier standing there on a column. This is the monument for the Russian soldier, to commemorate the soldiers of the Red Army that died during the Battle of Vienna, when the Soviets were the first ones to arrive here in 1945 and to clear and clean the city from the Nazis. And there's about 18,000 of these soldiers from the Red Army that died, and so they requested after the war a monument for these victims, and Austria had to build it within no time after the war, although it was difficult times and a lot of destruction and not much money. But you cannot deny the wish of the Soviets. That would not have been a good idea, so they built this for the Soviets. That was 1945, when the end of the Second World War finally happened, and then the Allied forces, they were governing Vienna for 10 years. 1955, then Vienna would become independent again, become a republic again, and the Allied forces, they finally left Austria. Now, on the left, after just behind this modern building, which is the very, very recommendable Vienna Museum, we have the most beautiful Baroque church north of the Alps. It's Charles Church. Have a look now to the left. Beautiful example for Baroque architecture commissioned by Charles VI, because he thanked God that he survived the plague. And on the right now, a quick look, there is the Musikverein, the home of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. In there we have the New Year's concert every 1st of January in the Golden Hall, this beautiful concert hall with a very, very great acoustics and a completely different style. Now on the left, these are modern buildings from around 1900, Jugendstil, Art Nouveau style station buildings for the train system in the past, and nowadays is we have the entrance to the underground station, so they're still used today. One more modern Art Nouveau building left, 11 o'clock, a white building with a golden ball actually. This is the Secession, the exhibition building for the modern artists around Gustav Klimt, and the golden ball that you can see there, this should symbolize actually a crown of gilded laurel leaves. The Viennese, though, they call this the golden cabbage head, because it's located next to the Nash Market. This is our famous historic open-air street market with 120 historic market stalls, and there you can buy the real cabbage, the vegetable. And yeah, the Nash Market is also a great place to wander around, to enjoy the views, and they have all these specialities, exotic fruits, vegetables. They have food and drink there, many restaurants, cafes, food from all over the world, so a great place to spend a few hours there, not far from the city center actually. As we are about to return now to the ring road close to the city center, and there we see the first building that was finished along the ring road in the year 1869. As I said, this construction of the ring road lasted for decades into the 20th century, so when that building was finished, everything around was still under construction. But the Opera House, they opened it already in 1869. It is the building now on the left. And on the right, as we turn left in a bit, a beautiful building, as most people would agree on that nowadays, but back then they hated it. The people criticized it, very ugly, an architectural catastrophe they call it, for some reasons. And so even the emperor, he didn't like it, he criticized it, and so one of the two architects involved, he committed suicide actually because of that loss of reputation and of that criticism. But then when the Opera House finally was opened, the people started to love it. It became a great success. Until today it is a very successful opera house, very famous throughout the world. Not so easy to get tickets, usually it's pretty sold out. You could only get standing tickets on the last minute, but then you have to stand through the opera actually, which is not sometimes not very easy, because these operas, they can last many hours. More than 2,000 people can fit into the opera house actually. And yeah, it's a repertory theater, so every night they have a different performance, which means they have to set up the stage every day, maybe 2 times, because they have rehearsals also during the day. So people there, they work around the clock in 3 shifts actually to make everything happen. And so, not surprisingly, this opera is not profitable. It's highly subsidized, like many other theaters and also the museums here in Vienna. They're all owned by the government and they subsidize them, because Vienna likes to position itself as a city of culture, and we put a great emphasis on providing a lot of cultural activities for everyone. The opera, by the way, was also almost completely destroyed during the Second World War, and they rebuilt it only after the war. So it's not clear why they bombed the opera. It's not a legitimate target, but most probably there's one assumption that they thought this is a train station from above. They made a mistake, and that's why they dropped the bombs. Now, continuing on the ring road, we see a gentleman on the right in a bit sitting there looking at the ring road. This guy has never been to Vienna actually, but we gave him a monument. This is Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, actually the German poet and playwright, sitting there next to a beautiful historic park, the Burg Garden, the Imperial Garden. That was the private garden of the Habsburgs, because it's located at the backside of the Imperial Palace, and in there we find another very famous monument of a famous composer who lived in Vienna for 10 years. This is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Now on the right side we got the monument of Mozart. And yeah, he lived here the last 10 years of his life. He was born in Salzburg, back then not part of Austria. He came here, and the last 10 years of his life were the most successful. He earned a fortune while living in Vienna, but his second talent was to spend money. So he spent it all. The money ran through his fingers. He liked to party, to gamble, expensive apartments, fancy clothes, and so on and so forth. And he died already at the age of 35. He left nothing but debts behind, and throughout his life he was always asking for money, taking loans from friends and sponsors, and yeah, not returning everything actually. Now on the right side, I briefly mentioned it, this is the Imperial Palace, the winter residence of the Habsburgs, and we will walk through parts of that area. And on the left side, there we have our state museums, the Museum of Fine Arts and the Museum of Natural History. And these two museums, this is where we will get off the bus actually in a bit, but we will continue just a little bit further on the ring road, because there is maybe the most beautiful of all these buildings here. It's the Parliament building, and this is almost newly renovated. Last year they opened it again after 5 years of renovation. It was very costly, 430 million euros for the renovation. It was modernized and it really looks good now. It's on the left, just in a few seconds. Looks a bit like a Greek building with all these columns. That was done on purpose. Greece is considered the cradle of democracy, and the parliament is also a symbol of democracy. So that's why they used the Greek style here. In front we have Pallas Athena standing there with a spear. This is the goddess of wisdom, and as we like to joke, the goddess of wisdom, she's looking away from the parliament. She doesn't want to turn around to see what's going on inside there. In her hand, a golden little winged lady. This is another goddess. This is Nike. It's not goddess of the sneakers, it's the goddess of victory actually. And so you might have noticed the buildings along the ring road, they have different styles, different architectural styles. They're always resembling an old style. They look much older, but they're all, as I said, from the second half of the 19th century also, and this is very typical. This is the Vienna ring road style. It shows a historic style which is suitable for the meaning of the building actually. And so these buildings have the same age, but they all look very different. That's rather unique, I would say. Now, turning left and returning to the museums, there is one building on the right side, just behind the park, and this is quite an impressive building as well. This is the City Hall for the mayor of Vienna. The mayor of Vienna is also the governor of the federal state of Vienna, because Vienna is one of the 9 Austrian federal states, and it's the smallest in size but not in population. You can have a look at the City Hall if you look to the right now as we turn left. So this is, let's say, the government of Vienna, and they built their government next to the empire's government, the parliament so to say, and they made it much taller, much bigger in size. That was quite a statement of the Viennese to build their parliament next door to the empires, and yeah, exceeded in size and height. That was a statement. Vienna is maybe more important, our parliament is more important, Vienna is the only important city, or let's say only Vienna is important in the whole empire. That's what they wanted to show actually with that construction. We got one more building now after this little roundabout. On the right side there are 2 lions at the entrance next to the stairs leading up. This is the Palace of Justice, our High Court. And then we will be returning to the Museum of Natural History, and there we will get off the bus in a few moments. So yeah, time to prepare for getting off the bus. You can leave your things that you might not need on the walk on the bus if you know that you return with us again. If you're not sure, then take everything with you. Our walk now will be about 45 minutes to 1 hour, I would say. And there will be toilets at the end of the walk. At St. Stephen's Square there are toilets available. Yeah, and I will be on channel number 3. So we can get ready also to connect to our listening devices to set the channel, and in a few moments we will get off the bus and then we start from outside. Are there any questions now? Okay, so far so good. So yeah, I will see you outside in a bit. Thank you.